Welcome back. Daily Show. Hitting you in the nose on a Tuesday. Tom Emery, friend of the show, joins us now. Tom, how are we doing today?
Hey, CJ, how you doing?
Oh, doing great. It's great to talk to you, Tom, and really excited to talk more about this new book on Illinois and the Revolutionary War. This is exciting.
Well, it's something I'm really proud of. No one had really ever written anything specifically on Illinois in the war until I came along, which surprised me. I can't believe that happened. The book actually arrived just yesterday at my house, and I can't tell you how excited I am about it. I had so much fun doing it, and I'm just happy to be talking about it with you today.
Well, and Tom, not to be funny with you, I didn't know that Illinois even had a role during the Revolutionary War. The territory did.
Well, a lot of people didn't realize that. You're hardly alone. While we didn't have the large battles like the significant battles, I should say, like Bunker Hill or Yorktown, or the more glamorous battles, there's certainly a story to tell here. Certainly in Southern Illinois. I know a lot of people listen to us down in St. Clair County today. The Cahokia area had action. Kaskaskia in Southern Illinois had it. And even though it's across the present-day border, Vincennes, Indiana, had some very significant action, which freed up the Illinois country, the places we live today.
Just incredible. And you know, Tom, how much research goes into a book like this, especially because you're kind of going into uncharted waters in just this topic?
Well, I knew where to look. Being a professional, I knew where to look, so it was easier for me than I might have thought even. I'd also written about the Revolutionary War before. I'd written a number of different articles about it. I had an interest in it. So I got in depth, but I knew where to look, so it saved me quite a bit of time.
Just now, from start to finish, though, you know, how long does it take to compile this? And what research did you use to kind of assimilate this book and put it into that format?
Well, there were some primary sources which are invaluable, like the memoirs of George Rogers Clark. If that name sounds familiar to listeners, he's the older brother of William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition. His memoirs were invaluable, which is great because he was the dominant figure of the war in Illinois. There had been passages and a few pages written here and there by previous writers writing generally about Illinois history or what have you. I was able to tap into those. Obviously, this was before the age of newspapers in the area, so we couldn't use those. But I was able to pull together enough sources to craft my own work, and I was able to get a full-length book out of it.
What amazed you the most about this? You know, because you're someone who, like you said, you've done a lot of articles and especially, you know, Civil War time, but on the Revolutionary War too, and everywhere in between. Was there a moment where you kind of had the aha that this is why the book's being written?
I think one thing that people don't realize today is that the people that fought for freedom, fought for liberty in the Revolutionary War, wanted it very, very badly. I don't think people realize how hard they worked for it. A good example, I mentioned George Rogers Clark. One of his premier moments, I think the premier moment of the war in Illinois, was when he marched from Kaskaskia to Vincennes in early 1779. It's about 180 miles.
Oh, wow.
It was in winter, which we had a mild winter, but it had been a very wet winter. So there were significant parts of that march that he was going through water. Sometimes those men were sometimes chest deep.
Just incredible.
In icy water. Yeah, and you think about, and some of the men wrote about, and there are a couple of journals. Joseph Bowman, who's familiar to Revolutionary War buffs, will know him, left a journal, as did Clark, and they talked about how badly those men wanted it, how hard they were working for it. And I think that is something, when you think about that, you realize how important it was to a lot of these men.
Well, and that's where I think it's just so incredible is the story of the American Revolution is, you know, you had all walks of life coming together in certain sectors of the country to fight for, you know, to fight for this. And, you know, how does the distance from the hotbed of where the Revolutionary War is taking place, how does that affect the men that are going through Illinois and that are tracking through? Because this isn't like today, Tom, where I can email you and say, here's what we're working on next. How did they relay information that quick?
Well, they really couldn't. The headquarters of the Revolution, if you think about Virginia, Massachusetts, nation's capital, place like that, which was at the time was in Philadelphia. It took weeks, months for things to get back and forth here. That is one reason that Illinois was kind of out on its own. It had been for decades. When the French, then the British first, French first, and the British ruled it, governance here was very lax because it was too far away, too sparsely populated. One fact I don't think people realize is that Illinois was a county of Virginia. The governor of Virginia, through part of the Revolution, was Patrick Henry. If that name sounds familiar, give me liberty, give me death.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually over Illinois.
Wow.
Yeah. When George Rogers Clark needed approval or permission to do something, he had to go through him.
That's incredible. I bet you there's 90% of us, probably 95, had no idea of that, because honestly, I didn't realize just probably, that those territories were still even recognized then, or was it just a plot of land?
Yeah, we were a full 30 years away from statehood.
Right.
It was still a territory, and it's really known as the Illinois country. CJ, the Illinois country is a very generic and vague term. Depending on what source you look at, the boundaries went anywhere from the Alleghenies to the Rockies. Seriously, I'm not lying to you. But most people, and I certainly accept, that the Illinois country was bounded by the Mississippi on the west, the Wabash on the east, the Ohio River on the south, and the Illinois River on the north. That takes in about half, two-thirds of what present-day Illinois is. I think that's more plausible than saying it went from the Alleghenies to the Rockies.
Right. Well, and Tom, we're talking a little bit about just the traveling of George Rogers Clark and the departure of Kaskaskia. You mentioned earlier too, just some the battles, and take me through that clash at St. Louis, if you could.
Sure.
And just how it played out.
The clash at St. Louis, what made that interesting is that touched off what I call the game of vengeance, because there became a back and forth of revenge between both sides. The British attacked St. Louis on May 26, 1780. They also made a simultaneous attack with some of their American Indian allies on Cahokia. What ended up happening is Spain controlled the areas west of Mississippi. The British came into St. Louis, the Spanish stuffed that. The attack on Cahokia was in turn stuffed by the Americans, again by, there's this name again, George Rogers Clark. Well, that touched off a string of events where some people, some from Cahokia and others, were actually going as far as southwest Michigan to inflict revenge on the British for having done this.
Oh, wow.
And it went back and forth. So think in mind, you're going from our area, Cahokia is not that far from where we live, going into southwest Michigan, over the wilderness, through the wilderness, to do these type of things. It just went back and forth for a while. There was a expedition on the Rock River, which is in the present-day Quad Cities, which originate from this area. Again, in response to the attack on St. Louis.
Well, and like you said earlier, Tom, it really just shows at what lengths that these fighters went, to really preserve what they believed in.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's something we should appreciate today. There's so many things about American history that are become controversial today, or people may or may not want to talk about, but the people that really respect history really should appreciate how hard the faction of Americans, colonials, were from the colonials in the east out here to the west, what they went through to gain liberty and what we have today.
1,000%. And Tom, I also saw just in a little synopsis of the book, and would love to talk a little further on this, is did Lafayette, he visited Illinois?
Yes, Marquis de Lafayette is one of the fascinating figures of the Revolutionary War on the whole. He was only about 19 when he got here, but through his full support behind George Washington, they formed a very, very close relationship, spent thousands and thousands of dollars on money, fought valiantly in a number of battles in the Revolution, and it's just a cherished figure here in America today. he actually made, as part of a 50th anniversary tour of the then smaller United States in 1824-25, he made it out here to Illinois. And Illinois had only been state for about 6 years.
Wow.
But he visited Kaskaskia, St. Louis, went back down to Nashville, Tennessee, and came up through Shawneetown, which is a very historic town on the banks of the Ohio River, and was greeted in kind of the primitive way of Illinois at the time, because we were not very well developed even then, by throngs of people, and just in these wonderfully overdone ceremonies in these small towns. It's just you talk about the moments you've heard the aha moment, even though it was years after the Revolution. That was one of those.
I could 100% see that. Now, also, Tom, I know in the book there's information on many of Clark's lieutenants, but also a fascinating look at the balance of, the state's American Indians during the time of the conflict. How was that relationship? Was that kind of the same as what was going on out east?
The Indian alliances with the white fighters went back and forth.
Okay.
The Americans and the British jockeyed for Indian loyalty throughout the war in Illinois, as they did elsewhere, and those allegiances tended to change, partly because the American Indians were divided themselves. But some of one of the dominant tribes at the time was actually a confederation of the Illinois tribe, the Illini tribe, which our state takes its name from. They were a conglomeration of several tribes, and you'll remember these. You'll recognize these names: the Kaskaskia tribe, the Peoria, the Cahokia, the Tamaroa. Those are place names for us today. So that was some of those in southern Illinois. The Sauk and the Fox in northwestern Illinois. That was kind of the basis of the expedition on the Rock River. When Sauk were attacked, again, we mentioned this a few minutes ago, for their role or supposed role in the attack on St. Louis. So the Americans and British were constantly striving for American Indian loyalties because they knew the importance of it, as well as the importance of their overall presence in what was the Illinois country.
I just think, Tom, it's so fascinating because, in just a little bit of backstory, when I was first reading about the American Revolution, I feel like we all were, back in school, I kind of got this whole narrative of, it was kind of just always a great working relationship with the Native Americans or the American Indians that were there.
Some of the battles, some of the conflicts I heard about involved American Indians against either the British, the Americans, in some cases the French, because the tribes, as you would expect, because it was kind of every man for himself at the time, tended to go with whoever was supplying them with the most gifts and whoever offered them a better deal. That certainly makes perfect sense. And so the allegiances kept changing, and it was a very, very easy relationship between the American Indians and the whites, whether they be Europeans or Americans.
Well, and really just fascinating stuff, Tom. And as we're looking at this, and I think it's going to be a really great, obviously there's in-depth research, but also noting here an array of artwork and a lot of really great information. Can you fill me in on what all this book entails?
The book takes in the prelude to the war, what set it up, how we got there. Looks at the top. It's kind of an episodic account because it looks at some of the top figures such as George Rogers Clark, Joseph Bowman, Father Pierre Jabot. The people in the area will know Waterloo Jabot High School, named for him. Francis Vigo, some of Clark's other lieutenants. The various corners of Illinois and, to an extent, the Midwest that the war spread to within the borders of the Illinois country and outside. The effect, the legacy, because the legacy is great. Again, the fact that the Marquis de Lafayette visited here and was so well received. How many place names have? 29 counties in the state of Illinois of our 102 counties are named after Revolutionary War figures. And there are several hundred, as I've seen estimates as many as 780 Revolutionary War soldiers who are buried here. So I talk a lot about the legacy of the war because it's something we all feel today.
Well, and now, before we, because I know there's a couple of other things I'd like to talk about too. Want to ask you where you can get the book. in all that great detail. Were there any writings that you could see of, some of the main names of the American Revolution talking about the state of Illinois or whatever, or the name they gave us? Or was it just kind of a footnote and we have a lot bigger fish to fry here?
Well, George Rogers Clark left a great memoir. It's very hard to pick through. I rely heavily on the redacted or edited versions, which I quote in my book because it is so difficult to work through. The powers that be out east didn't do a whole lot with it because we were so far away and they didn't really care as much. But fortunately, some of the people here, such as Clark, left some great writings that you can really use today.
Just fascinating. Tom, where can we get this book?
You can get straight from me. You can call me at 217-710-8392 or email me. This is all one word, no dots or underscores. Enjoy history today at gmail.com.
We will link everything in a write-up on RiverBender.com for that information too, Tom. And a couple of things I want to hit on, because I'd love to have you back actually when we do our Christmas one, because this is always fun when we talk about Christmas in Illinois and just Christmas history. But I wanted to ask you about this Americans celebrating Christmas in 1776. I think it ties right in. Take me through this piece.
Sure. 1776 is the year we celebrate today because it was the year of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of our nation. But in truth, 1776 at the time was a very down and difficult year for the Americans. General Washington had been pushed out of New York in a very bad defeat for him. The Continental Army, their enlistments are about ready to expire. So there's uncertainty whether we would even have an army. They're badly undersupplied, badly underfed. So things were pretty bleak in 1776 for the Continental Army and really for the colonial cause. Washington needed a victory badly and to help spur and inspire the men to reenlist. So in a very dramatic move, he crossed the Delaware, the famous painting of crossing the Delaware, which I can tell you right now, CJ, he was not standing in that boat.
Okay, I was so curious. Every time I see it, I'm like, there's an ice chunk.
Yeah, there's no way he'd been able to do that, because one thing, that he might have capsized the thing. For another thing, it just wouldn't have been possible in the poor conditions. But he pulls off a surprise Christmas night attack on this city of Trenton, New Jersey, where the German Hessian soldiers are celebrating Christmas. They had a little too much to drink. They're not really ready for the battle. Washington pulls off a smashing victory. It actually helps inspire the American cause, and I think it's a great holiday story. It's actually one of the few battles that Washington actually won. Washington was not a great general. He's not a great tactical general. But as he learned as he went along, and because he was able to fight the British toe-to-toe, it actually furthered the cause along. But that was later on after the smashing victory at Trenton, which, I don't want to say turned the American cause, but it was an impetus to keep going and shore up support.
It was truly one of those first American resolve moments.
It really was. And I think it's a neat Christmas story and a very fun episode that we can enjoy today about the American cause.
So, Tom, one thing about this, I've always been curious about, was this attack all by boat, or did they move in others, people?
They crossed by boat, but it was a land attack. They got across, divided up into sections, divided the army, and went in like that.
And then my final question on this is, did they bring horse or anything? I mean, did they bring artillery? And how do you get that onto a boat and across an icy river?
As far as my readings, DJ, it was all foot. Most of it was all on foot.
That makes sense.
They didn't have a lot of artillery, but they were able to get some of it across. But it was It was a water entrance but land attack.
Okay. No, and that makes sense. It just always fascinates me. You know, number one, Tom, I'd be in that boat if I was a soldier going, you have got to be kidding me. This is going to be fun.
Well, they've been free. One of the things that made the American victory so impressive was the conditions. It was such poor conditions. Cold, snowy. There's a reason that you don't read about a lot of wintertime attacks in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, because armies can't move.
Right.
Not back then, they couldn't. But that was one of the rare ones, and I think it caught the Germans off, the Hessians fighting on the side of the British off guard, and was a smashing win for America.
Tom, it's always great talking to you, and really just such fascinating history. I'd love to get you back on soon for when we tape our Christmas show, because it always is just great stuff and great information.
It's great being with CJ. RiverBender audience is great to talk to, and for all of you have been very supportive of me. Thank you for all of it. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Tom. Have a great holiday season.
Take care, CJ. Thank you, sir.
9:46 is the time. More Daily Show next.